Thank you. Thank you. So, Melanie, first of all, I am so grateful to you, first and foremost, for writing the book, The Finnish Guide to Happiness. It was such a profound book. I've been going on all of this sort of introspection and I'm planning for my trip. I listened to your book and it was just so refreshing. It was such a beautiful way to see it that we literally changed our trip. And that was what I was so excited to share with you because it was like really
Thank
cool.
you. I'm so pleased to hear that. It's really touching, and I'm just so happy that it resonated with you. And I mean, it's amazing to me that you've decided to come and visit Helsinki and see Finland for yourself.
Yeah, and I just I know that it's one of those things where it felt like the timing was perfect. I was trying to
Mhm.
see exactly what I was going to be doing up there. I had not put Helsinki on my list of places to travel because as I had looked at it, it's like, well, I'm going to see Norway and I'm going to see Denmark. It's like, aren't they all about the same? It's like in my mind, it's just like it just seems so far to keep going. And
Yeah.
at the same time, there was not like a specific reason to come join and see Finland until I read your book or
Oh,
listened, I should say, the audiobook.
yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, it's quite similar, I guess, culturally in some ways, but then it has its own distinct properties. It's not Scandinavian, it's
Totally.
Nordic. So, yeah, it's quite unique. And I'm glad you're coming because it is just that little bit further.
Yes, and that's just it. It is just a little bit further. And so one of the things that I loved about your book so much was understanding how the Finnish people don't even like the title of one of the happiest places or the happiest people on the planet. They're like, what are you talking about? So I love that. It's just like the humility of the Finnish people. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's very Finnish. I think it makes them very uncomfortable. And I think a lot of what makes life here, for many people that they're so content is it's quite simple.
Yeah.
It's the kind of simplicity of living. And so I guess to Finns, it's kind of like, but doesn't everybody live like
Right.
this? And it's often a surprise to say, no, we don't have this concept where you can walk on anyone's land or pick berries or fish wherever you like. That's quite unique to this part of the world, especially for myself coming from a country that was colonized and,
Yes.
so it's quite a different atmosphere. So I think they're quite surprised to hear, oh, okay, maybe it's not like this everywhere.
Well, and tell me what was some of the biggest contrast when you went from New Zealand to Finland? Like you talk about going from a place of colonization to a place of much more openness and just like the nature aspects. I mean, people think of New Zealand as this beautiful nature island, and it is in its own right, but there was such a difference that you noticed when you went to Finland. Can you speak into that?
Yeah, well, you have four very distinct seasons here, and Finns are very pragmatic. They're very like, it's cold, it's always been cold, let's just get on with it. So they're very well organized. I don't think Helsinki Airport has ever shut because of the weather.
Wow.
Everything works really well. They're also, generally speaking, very private people. So one thing I noticed is and you'll notice too, it's very quiet here. I live in the capital city. It's people respect the rules. So that also makes me reflect on my culture in New Zealand. I think because of our history, we tend to celebrate national heroes who give a middle finger to authority. We're kind of, and so that's one thing I noticed here. People trust the government, they
Yeah.
follow rules. And at first, I found that kind of irritating, but now I've learned to really appreciate it, especially during times like COVID. We
Yeah.
never had full lockdowns because, people respect the rules. And there's this kind of, if we all pitch in, which I think comes from their history of the Winter War and other, events in their history, then we'll all get through this together. So I've learned to really appreciate that. But yeah, culture, it's 5 million people. It's very similar to New Zealand, but there are some real cultural differences that I notice and I've kind of learned to appreciate.
Well, and you also mentioned in your book, which I loved, is the idea of even just the assumptions for children are different. Like having a child come into kindergarten and the expectation is, okay, they're going to learn to serve themselves and wash their dish and sort of do these things. And moms are like, wait, what? If you're not from this area, it's like, I don't understand. Like, how they're not old enough. They shouldn't, what, I'm supposed to take care of them. It's a whole different philosophy and it sets them up for a whole different way of being from the very early age.
Yes, so this concept of sisu is the strongest Finnish value, and it's resilience or guts or kind of being able to rely on yourself. And I can see why, especially during previous wars, no one was coming to save them. They had to defend their own borders. But also, when it's minus 25 Celsius, you can't just lie down and give up. You have to
Right.
keep going. And
Right.
so it is ingrained in children from a really young age. And so you'll notice here kids walking to school by themselves, kids catching the subway on their own from age 7.
Amazing.
And part of that is it's so safe. So adults don't interact with children they don't know. It would be strange. And you'll also see babies sleeping outside, even in winter.
Wow. And that's the thing. It's like I think that what the Finnish people have discovered is that is the basic essence of humanity, that people really are there in a community space to actually help each other. And I think this is what happens is in the colonialism that we both experienced, there's a very much of an us them mentality that gets driven in early on. It's like nobody's going to take care of you. You're on your own. You got to figure it out for yourself. It's like, and that attitude is a self-defeating, self-sufficient, a self-limiting belief that then comes into a place where we live into that belief system, where the Finnish people have the opposite. It's like, no, no, we're all in this together. We're in this really, really cold climate. We got to work together. We got to figure out how we want to be together in this space. And yeah, like we have low crime because it's like we want to be the best versions of ourselves. And that's part of the encouragement of everyone living out their best potential. It sounds such a beautiful place to live. And like you said, I would imagine when someone comes in from the outside, they're like, this is mind blowing. But Finnish are like, isn't this how it is for everybody? This is how it should be. And it feels that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, having visited other countries with high rates of people following rules and behaving, there's that kind of undercurrent of what's driving it. So some countries with very high penalties for crime or losing face. I wonder if it's almost the motivation is sometimes a little fear based.
Sure.
But when you look at, say, the Finnish prison population and the rates of recidivism, it's so low compared to other countries I've lived in. So I think the kind of undercurrent as well is quite different to, say, other countries where you might first notice, wow, everyone's very well behaved. But what's driving it? What's behind that?
Yeah, and I think that what's behind it is such a powerful question to be asking because ultimately if we are coming from a place of our own growth and our own betterment and we see that not only are we trying to do that but our fellow humans are trying to do the same thing, then it really creates a different environment for success. So even if it's like, okay, if I'm in a Finnish prison, I'm here to be better. I made a mistake. I screwed up. I did something that I'm not proud of. Here's my opportunity to become better and not have a penalization for the rest of my life. This is not going to be my scarlet letter that I have to wear forever. This is like, okay, I made a mistake. I made good for it. And now I made myself better. And here's how I've improved because of it. That's the reformation that we should all be aspiring to, as opposed to let's lock it up and keep people throw away the key, which is unfortunately a lot of how the United States works. And the prison population becomes its own subculture where people who actually are in the prison system for certain periods of time, they don't know how to operate outside because they've had to learn a new set of rules that are not society rules. They're the prison rules. And that's not, so I'm really impressed with the way that there's this systems thinking that comes into the Finnish population. The idea of how people show up in the ways in which they show up feels like the right way to live. And I love that you're in alignment with all that and you were willing to put all that in a book and share it with people and say, hey, here's some things to think about systematically, not just individually. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And when I was asked to write the book, I guess I tried to sabotage it and say, "Hey, I'm not finished," but Audible were really looking for an outsider's perspective, and it's been quite encouraging to have Finnish listeners say, "Yeah, I think this is an accurate take," because I am an outsider and I'm not fluent in the language, so these are just my perceptions, but they're based on living in places like New Zealand and Australia and working with the prison population in particular and the differences I notice. Yeah.
Well, and I love that because the idea is I think it would have been harder for a Finnish person to write what you wrote because it would just be like, well, isn't it obvious? Isn't this how everybody is? Like, why was there a book about this? This is just a way of life, right? And I think the idea of having an outsider come in and observe is like, no, 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 you are unique. There are the uniquenesses here that shouldn't be unique. It would be awesome if the world was like this, but it's not. And so let's talk about sort of what it is that this culture does that other cultures could aspire to. And then how do we become better at seeing that it is possible to live in this way in unity, and I think that's the difference is that like I remember one of the parts of the book that was so astonishing that the traffic tickets are based on a percentage of salary and how much you make. And someone, got pulled over for speeding and it was such a high ticket and they were saying, no, but I know that my money is going to all the right spaces. Like I know that this is going to actually make our country better. So yeah, I got penalized and yes, it was my mistake for speeding, but ultimately the money's going to the right place, so I'm okay with it. I mean, it's just a whole different perspective as opposed to I'm going to fight it. I'm going to go to court. I'm going to like spend twice as much as my ticket just to prove that I'm right and you're wrong. It's a whole different attitude. Yeah.
Yeah, and you would have heard too about the studies that show, the high percentage of people here who are happy to pay taxes
Yeah.
because you see where it goes. And
Yeah.
as a parent of, my son was 2 when we moved here and now he's 13. I
Amazing.
haven't made a school lunch. The whole time we've been here, I haven't paid for books, I haven't paid for schooling, I haven't bought uniforms. So, growing up in a small town in New Zealand where, quite a few kids came to school hungry,
Yeah.
just seeing how it creates this value that education is a basic human right. And the literacy rate here is 100%, which is wild to me. And I worked in a suburb of Australia where the literacy rate among adults, Australian adults, was 60%. And a Finn said to me, how can you do that to each other?
Yeah.
I just said, I know it's really complicated, but I know. So, yeah, people, especially parents, you see where your taxes go here, and it, goes towards giving everyone an equal start as much as possible.
Well, if we can stay on human rights for a second, I think there's one other thing. I didn't hear this explicit in the book, but I would love to know about like housing as a human right, because that's one of the things that's near and dear to my heart. I've been doing midnight runs in New York City for, every quarter for as long as I can remember. And part of the things that I think has been so challenging in the United States is the systematic ways that keep homeless populations high in the US. And I didn't hear anything about that specifically in Finland, but obviously with the weather being what it is, I can imagine that it would be very detrimental to have a homeless population where you just freeze to death. You wouldn't be able to come inside. Can you speak a little bit about what you've experienced there in terms of what's happening in Finland on the homelessness front?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll notice right away the apparent low or, almost minimal rates of homelessness. And I'm talking about, rough sleeping, living on the streets. It's very, very low here and very like hardly visible at all. And Finland, I believe, does have a housing first approach. So housing first and then the wraparound services around that, which keeps that number down. So yeah, it is quite different. When I worked in Australia, we had men's hostels for guys getting out of prison. And sometimes the guys would say to me, oh, no, thanks. It's just like being in prison. It's the same guys, but there's no locks on the door. I'd be better off sleeping rough. So people were almost not choosing. I'll be careful about that term, but I came to understand that sleeping on the streets was preferable for some people in terms of safety. So I think you'll really notice in Finland how low the rates of rough sleeping is. Yes, it's due to the weather, but even in summer, it's quite remarkable. But I've only read into it here. I haven't worked in community services in Finland. But yeah, I did read it. So housing first approach, and then the support services come around that.
So beautiful. Well, again, I'm so excited, and the last thing I want to do is I just want to actually thank you, just first and foremost, for even just accepting my outreach. I reached out to you on LinkedIn to say, look, I know this is random, but here's the thing. It's like literally I'm coming into this space, and the reason why is because I was so touched by your book, and the willingness to even just to have the conversation we're having right now is so beautiful and heartfelt, and I sincerely appreciate it. And I'm really also grateful that you're allowing me to record this so that I can share it with the people who are fascinated about how does one put together a full world tour, 52 cities in as many weeks. How do you do that? Like, what does that even come? And so it's this kindness of people like yourself who've really supported me on my journey through this whole time to help me really get to that space of being able to explore the world and then show it to my transgender daughter and be able to have her experience the same thing I'm experiencing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet you both in real life. I'm so pleased you're coming and thanks for reaching out. And I love random encounters. It's probably the Kiwi in me, actually, that
Me too.
that appeals to. But yeah, thanks so much for getting in touch. And I'm so glad you've added Helsinki. We'll have almost 24-hour daylight when you're here. It'll be a really special time. We don't take it for granted. Summer is so short, so it's a really beautiful time to visit. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you both.
Thank you, Melanie. I appreciate you.